I'm Jezreel from the Customer Success Team at Consultare Inc. Group. Last week, we covered the Food Defense Program as outlined in FSSC 22000 version 6, clause 2.5.3. Today, we will focus on clause 2.5.4, Food Fraud Mitigation Program under FSSC 22000 version 6, additional requirements. This program focuses on identifying, assessing, and controlling vulnerabilities in the supply chain that could lead to food fraud, such as substitution, mislabeling, adulteration, counterfeiting, or theft, to ensure that all raw materials and finished products remain authentic and traceable. Understanding this program helps organizations strengthen supplier verification, improve transparency in sourcing practices, and maintain consumer trust by ensuring that products are genuine, safe, and compliant with regulatory and customer requirements. By implementing a comprehensive food fraud mitigation program, companies reduce the risk of economic and reputational losses, demonstrate proactive compliance with global food safety standards, and build a culture of integrity and accountability across their supply chain. This free training is sponsored by Consultare Inc. Group, a compliance company. Founded in 2007, we began by assisting businesses with U.S. import and export compliance and have since evolved into a global provider of food safety, quality, and certification support. Today, our services revolve around compliance management software, specialized training, and end-to-end support services that help organizations achieve and maintain compliance with international standards. Through our platform, interlinkiq.com, we offer an integrated compliance management system that streamlines documentation, monitoring, and audit readiness. We also provide dedicated compliance and certification support programs for FSVP, PCQI, SQF, BRCGS, FSSC 22000, ISO 9001, GMP, and HACCP, helping businesses strengthen the regulatory compliance, enhance operational efficiency, and ensure alignment with global food safety and quality management standards. Let's take a look at our training schedule. For this week, we will focus on the Food Fraud Mitigation Program as outlined in FSSC 22000 Clause 2.5.4. Gaining a clear understanding of this requirement is essential to achieving and sustaining your FSSC 22000 certification goals. In today's session, we will begin by familiarizing ourselves with the FSSC 22000 version 6, additional requirements clause 2.5.4, Food Fraud Mitigation Program. We will start with a clear description of the requirements, followed by a walkthrough of the compliance action activities, which are your scheduled tasks carried out on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and semi-annual basis to ensure ongoing certification readiness. We will also discuss the importance of the annual review and internal audit activities, which serve as checkpoints to verify the effectiveness of the program and maintain continuous improvement. After this, we will open the floor for a Q&A session, giving you the opportunity to clarify any requirements and ask questions related to implementation. If you have questions as we go through the presentation, feel free to type them in the chat box and we'll make sure to address them during the discussion afterward. As part of this training, you can also access a free 90-day trial of our FSSC 22000 certification management software. This tool helps streamline compliance tasks, assign accountability, and keep audit-ready records. It's also a great way to prepare for FSSC 22000 certification, as many participants use it to get familiar with the requirements and practice spotting compliance gaps before an official audit. Finally, upon completion of this training, each participant will receive a familiarization training certificate. To ensure that you receive your certificate, please make sure that you have filled up the free certification familiarization training sign-up form that we shared in the chat box. On the screen, you will see a sample of the familiarization certificate that you will receive upon completing each session. With that, let's move forward to our training session where we will be working directly with the FSSC 22000 Compliance Management System software. Let's start by going over the description of the Food Fraud Mitigation Program. Please take a look at the description on the screen. The summary of requirements is outlined below to make implementation easier. It says, to implement FSSC 2.5.4.1 vulnerability assessment, the organization shall first conduct and document the food fraud vulnerability assessment based on a defined methodology to identify and assess potential vulnerabilities. Develop and implement appropriate mitigation measures for significant vulnerabilities. The assessment shall cover the processes and products within the scope of the organization. 1.2, to implement FSSC 2.5.4.2 or plan, the organization shall have a documented food fraud mitigation plan based on the output of the vulnerability assessment, specifying the mitigation measures and verification procedures. The food fraud mitigation plan shall be implemented and supported by the organization's FSMS or Food Safety Management System. The plan shall comply with the applicable legislation, cover the processes and products within the scope of the organization, and be kept up to date. For food chain category F2, in addition to the above, the organization shall ensure that their suppliers have a food fraud mitigation plan in place. Now you may update or edit the description as needed, for example, to reflect revisions when new versions or editions of the FSSC 22000 are released. Now to implement this program, we've developed a list of action items found in the compliance tab. So this feature will help the FSQA or food safety team leader stay organized by scheduling tasks based on their required frequency, whether they are daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, or semi-annually. So you can choose to add your own compliance activities or have our team preload the required tasks to ensure that you meet all the necessary requirements under this specific section. So here are some examples of your compliance action items to comply with 2.5.4 Food Fraud Mitigation Program requirements. For your daily activities, it includes verify supplier documentation such as certificate of analysis, authenticity certificates, traceability documents for all incoming raw materials. Check for abnormal deliveries like unusual pricing, packaging, labeling inconsistencies, or missing supplier verification. Ensure traceability records are properly filled for all received and dispatched materials. Monitor access control to storage areas to prevent unauthorized handling or substitution. And communicate potential fraud alerts from regulatory agencies or supplier notifications to relevant departments. Now, for your weekly activities, this includes review supplier performance against authenticity criteria and documentation completeness, inspect storage and labeling integrity for high-risk raw materials and ingredients, verify control measures like seals or identification labels on sensitive or high-value products, monitor procurement activities for unapproved supplier use or price anomalies, and conduct mini internal verification of food fraud control points like sampling of raw materials and packaging. For your quarterly activities, first is to update vulnerability assessment based on new suppliers, materials, or incidents. Reassess control effectiveness for all mitigation measures implemented. Verify supplier compliance by checking that all approved suppliers maintain their own food fraud mitigation plan. Conduct internal audits on the food fraud programs, implementation, and documentation, and hold cross-functional meetings like the procurement, QA, or production departments, to review fraud trends on or new vulnerabilities. And for your biannual or semi-annual activities, this include review and validate food fraud mitigation plan for accuracy, completeness, and compliance with legislation, update verification procedures and monitoring frequency based on incident data or changes in sourcing, benchmark fraud controls against industry alerts, regulatory advisories, or database updates from RASFF, FDA, or FSA, and evaluate supplier network to identify changes in ownership, sourcing, or performance that could increase vulnerability. And finally, provide refresher training to staff on recognizing signs of food fraud and reporting procedure. So these are just examples of your compliance activities that you need to perform to comply with 2.5.4 Food Fraud Mitigation Program. Now, to complete each of these activities or these actions, we provided work instructions and detailed compliance activities in the instruction and evidence section. So it also comes with the required artifacts or records to document completion. For example, to complete the action item, which states that verify supplier documentation like COAs, authenticity certificates, traceability documents, for all incoming raw materials. So let's see the work instruction here on how to perform and how to complete this compliance action item. Now, to perform this compliance action item, you need to first review supplier certificates and documentation. So this can be done by verifying that each supplier provides required documents such as certificates of analysis, certificates of authenticity, and traceability or origin documentation for all raw materials. So the artifacts or records that you need to fill up or complete are supplier COAs and authenticity certificates, and supplier traceability or LAT documentation. Next step is to check supplier approval and status. So this can be done by confirming that the supplier is on the approved supplier list and that approval is current per FSSC 22000 requirements. So you need to prepare the approved supplier list and the approved supplier approval and evaluation forms. Next step is to match documentation to receive LATs. So the activity includes verifying that certificate of analysis and other documents correspond correctly to receive shipment LATs. So you need to check for the LAT number, the batch codes, and the expiry dates, and see to it that those information matches with the information in the certificate of analysis and other documents in hand. So you need to have your receiving lags with lot or batch number verification and material inspection records. Next step is to verify authenticity and completeness. You need to check that documents are signed, dated, and contain all required specifications for microbiological, chemical, or physical specs. So the artifacts or records needed here are your document verification checklist, as well as supplier correspondence or emails, especially when you are requesting the required documents from your supplier. Next is to review traceability and recall readiness. You need to ensure that supplier documentation supports full traceability from source to finished product and can be linked to recall procedures if needed. So you need to complete your traceability records and recall test documentation. Finally, you need to document and address nonconformances. So it includes recording any missing, incomplete, or non-compliant supplier documents and initiate corrective action as needed. So your artifacts and records here are your non-conformance reports or your NCRs and your CAPA or the corrective and preventive action records. So when you've completed or performed these activities, you now have to provide supporting evidence of compliance by uploading records, artifacts, or lags indicating compliance with the requirements. So in this case, we've uploaded an example of a compliance document, which is food fraud verification record supplier documentation check. So let's take a look at the document that we've uploaded. So it shows that the site has verified the authenticity, traceability, and quality documentation, like certificate of analysis or origin certificates for each incoming raw material. So for example, in the record ABC Spices Co., the product or the raw material supplied is ground turmeric. It was verified as compliant with all supporting documents, while the other supplier, which is Fresh Harvest Imports, they supplied coconut milk. It was marked non-compliant due to a missing authenticity certificate, demonstrating that the nonconformities are identified and corrective actions are taken. So the corrective action here is supplier was notified for immediate submission of the missing or authenticity or origin certificate. So in summary, this document confirms that the company is actively implementing controls to ensure that all incoming raw materials come from legitimate, verified sources, protecting against food fraud risk. So your goal is to perform all the compliance activities here according to the scheduled frequency by performing all the work instructions and providing evidence of compliance to ensure that your facility, processes, and documentation remain fully audit ready. So once again, these are just examples of compliance best practices that you can adapt in your facility. You may also customize or develop your own action items tailored to your specific processes. Now let's go over to the annual review tab, which also serve as your gap assessment tool or your internal audit checklist. So as you can see, it is presented in the form of a questionnaire aligned with the FSSC 22000 requirement. It lists all required annual review, assessment, or items to help you maintain compliance with the certification requirements. So here you will find the annual review items that you should review to maintain compliance with Food Fraud Mitigation Program. So here are some examples of the assessment questions that you need to complete. First are supplier documents like COA, authenticity certificates, or traceability verified upon every delivery. Are raw materials inspected for any abnormality like unusual packaging, price, or labeling? Are traceability records maintained accurately for all received and dispatched materials? Are storage and handling areas secured to prevent unauthorized access or substitution? Are food fraud alerts or regulatory updates communicated promptly to relevant personnel? Are supplier authenticity and documentation reviewed weekly for compliance? Are labeling, packaging, and seals of high-risk materials checked for tampering or inconsistencies? Are control measures like seals, coding, or batch verification effectively implemented and recorded? Are procurement and purchasing activities monitored for price fluctuations or unapproved sources? Are mini verifications or sampling checks performed to confirm authenticity of ingredients? Has the food fraud vulnerability assessment been reviewed and updated this quarter? Are current mitigation measures effective in addressing identified vulnerabilities? Do all approved suppliers have their own food fraud mitigation plans in place? Are internal audits conducted to verify compliance with the food fraud program? Are results of the food fraud program discussed in management or cross-functional meetings? Has the food fraud mitigation plan been validated and approved by the top management within the year? Are verification procedures updated based on new fraud incidents or supplier changes? Has the organization benchmarked fraud controls with current industry and regulatory alerts from RASFF, FDA, or FSA? Has supplier risk been reassessed for ownership, origin, or performance changes? And have refresher trainings been provided to employees on food fraud awareness and reporting? So just like in the compliance tab, you can add your own um, annual review item, or we can preload this for you. And additionally, you can see here the um, work instruction in the instruction and evidence section. So the work instruction or compliance activity serves as your guide on how to comply or how to complete the assessment questionnaire here. So, for example, to complete the audit checklist, which states that are raw materials inspected for any abnormality like unusual packaging, price, or labeling? Let's take a look at the work instruction here on how to complete this assessment item. So as part of your verification, you need to first receive the raw materials. So upon arrival, receiving personnel shall accept deliveries only at designated receiving areas and visually inspect the shipment before unloading. So the records that you need to prepare here are your receiving logbook, delivery receipt, or receiving schedule. Next is to conduct initial visual inspection. You need to inspect the external condition of packaging for abnormalities such as damage, swelling, tears, broken seals, unusual labeling, or any signs of tampering. So you need to fill up your receiving inspection form, visual inspection checklist, or take a photo documentation if applicable. Next is to check product identification and labeling. You need to verify that labeling information, such as the product name, lot number, expiration date, and any supplier details, is accurate and consistent with the PO or the purchase order. So you need to have your material receiving record, a copy of your PO, and your label verification log. Next step is to verify pricing and documentation consistency. So you need to cross-check the delivery invoice and COA or traceability documents against standard pricing or specifications to identify suspicious deviation. So you need to take note of the pricing changes because it might be a sign of substitution, um, especially when the price spike is very significant. So you need to have your invoice copy, certificate of analysis or authenticity certificate, and document verification lag in place here. And then you need to inspect the internal packaging upon opening. So for bulk or sensitive materials, you need to inspect the inner packaging and seals for irregularities that may indicate tampering or contamination. So the inner packaging inspection lag could be a good artifact or record to be completed here, your tamper check record, or your QA verification sheet. Next, you need to segregate and hold suspect materials. So if abnormalities are detected, like unusual packaging, labeling errors, or major price discrepancies, the affected materials must be immediately segregated and tagged as hold. So you need to have the hold tag or non-conformance report and material hold lag in this specific step. And then what you need to do next is to notify the QA or the FSSC practitioner for evaluation. So escalate any findings to QA or the FSSC practitioner for further assessment and disposition. And next is to approve and release materials. Materials with no abnormalities and verified compliance with specs shall be approved and released for use in production. You need to have your material release form, the QA approval log, or the receiving record with signature or sign off. And next is to document and file inspection results. So all inspection results, findings, and decisions must be recorded and filed following document control procedures. And finally, you need to conduct periodic review and trend analysis. The FSSC practitioner shall conduct periodic reviews of abnormality reports to identify patterns, implement preventive measures, and evaluate supplier performance. So just Just like in the previous tab, in the compliance action items, you need also to demonstrate compliance for each annual review assessment item. So you need to upload supporting evidence such as your records, logs, or other relevant documentation. For this example, are raw materials inspected for any abnormality? So we've uploaded here the Food Fraud Mitigation Program raw material inspection record. So as you can see, the inspection is conducted on cornstarch from ABC Ingredients, and it ensured that all packaging, labeling, price, supplier authenticity, certificate of analysis, as well as any abnormalities on odor, color, or form are all inspected. So the COA was verified and properly filed with the batch record. As you can see in this example, no irregularities were noted in product appearance or odor, and the material was consistent with the previous deliveries. So since no conformances or no non-conformances were identified, no corrective or preventive action were required here. The inspection was verified by the QA manager, confirming that the raw material met all authenticity and quality verification standards. And as a result, the cornstarch was accepted for use in production, demonstrating effective implementation of food fraud prevention controls during material receipt. So this is just an example of the compliance documents that you need to provide to comply with the requirements. Your goal is to complete all the annual review items or assessment items to keep your site fully prepared for both internal and external FSSC 22000 certification audits. Finishing this checklist confirms your compliance and ensures you are audit ready at all times.